In this video, we're starting a new project. I'm going to do a new penny farthing bike. We did one, and my daughter's having a grand time riding it around. But I want to do another one, which I plan to ride myself. I've got a few bikes here that I can use to chop up for the tubing and so forth that I'm going to need. But there's one thing I'm uncertain about. Am I going to do a standard penny farthing like the last time, or I have another idea in mind? On this bike, you can see the back wheel is driven by a chain from the pedals, and that this whole part, this whole rear triangle, is a separate assembly. Kind of like on the swing bike, I can just cut the front of the frame off and have a pedal driving a wheel, but then just extend these bars here quite a bit. So instead of that wheel being a 24-inch diameter wheel, it would actually be a 60-inch diameter wheel. We would then need an extension from here going straight up so that we could steer, and that would be the whole front wheel assembly. So instead of a standard penny farthing wheel where you're driving the wheel directly, we'd still be driving it from pedals, driving a chain, with the ability to change gears. So that's a consideration. Not exactly sure how I'm going to go with it yet, but that's what we're thinking about. I got these two 8-foot steel bars. They're 1 inch wide by 1/4 inch thick, and this is what I'm going to form into my rim. So the idea is I'm going to make a hoop out of this, and then we're going to do a collaboration with 10 Fingers Woodworking, and they're actually going to make the wheel. So we're going to start with a steel hoop, and they're going to do the spokes out of wood, and that's going to be our front wheel. I wanted a hoop of about 60 to 70 inches. Didn't have an exact requirement there, but unfortunately the steel is only available in 12-foot lengths. So I opted for two 8-foot lengths to make this out of. So the thing that I was faced with is, do I weld this into a single bar and then roll it into a hoop and then weld the other end, or do I roll it into a hoop and then weld it afterwards? The reason I'd like to have a single bar is because then I don't have to worry about the ends being not quite as bent as the rest of the length. Also, if I roll these as two separate pieces, then I'm faced with, how do I know that they're both the same radius, that they're both bent the same? So I was thinking I'd weld it together, but then I got to thinking, on this ring roller, there's just these three gears that the steel goes through, and if I got 16 feet of this steel hanging off the end of this, I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be faced with the problem that it's going to want to bend off of the wheel as it's coming out of here. So I think that 16 feet is just going to be too long. So the solution I've come up with is I'm going to try to get these to about the radius that I want, as close as possible, and then I'm going to do a weld, but I'm only going to weld the edges first. I'm not going to weld the whole length on the flat here. Just going to weld the edges, and then I'm going to put it through the ring roller again, and then get it, make sure that I've got a reasonable radius all the way through. And then, once I'm satisfied with that, then I'll go ahead and weld the whole thing together. So this is going nothing like what I expected. This rod has been through this ring roller half a dozen times, and I've got a reasonable amount of surface, surface where the teeth kind of dig in a deformation here. So, but I can't detect any bend on the bar, and if I crank the knob too much, then it seems to really kind of looks like the whole thing's about ready to fall apart, this whole ring roller. So I'm going to try going a little slower with more passes and see if it gets there. But it seems like all I'm doing is just kind of like moving it around. I'm not actually forming this metal at all. Well, this bar has been through the ring roller about 20 times, and I've got about an 80-foot radius on it. It's just barely bent. So I'm thinking that I'm going to try to heat this up. I don't know that much about heat treating, but I believe if I get this metal to red hot and let it cool off slowly, it'll take some of the temper off. Maybe that'll aid me here. So I do have an acetylene torch, and I'm going to try with maybe about 2 feet of this bar, try to heat it up and see if that does anything for me. So I'm getting the color change that I'm hoping for. Let's see if this is going to make a difference as far as putting a bend in the steel. Annealing the steel was certainly the thing to do. I've got more bend in 2 passes on this than I did in the previous 20. Now it'll be interesting to see how many passes I need to actually make this a half hoop. So trying to roll this into half a hoop on the ring roller has been absolutely no picnic whatsoever. So I put a ratchet strap on it, see if I can kind of bend it part of the way, kind of short circuit the whole thing a bit. We'll see how this works. So I've got the second bar heat treated here, but one thing is using the ring roller was an absolute nightmare. So I think maybe what the ring roller is going to be best for is putting the final bend, making sure we got that radius pretty close. Those we made for the last penny farthing that we did, and I think that what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to strap both bars together up against that and see if I can get a good piece of the bend into this bar before I even throw it in the ring roller. So my original plan was to have the other bar in there too, so that they would be bending at the same time. Doing this by myself, that turned out to be almost impossible. I'm pretty close to what I wanted to have here. In the background, you can hear the fan. The no-see-ums are absolutely crazy, and the fan's actually keeping them under control a bit. So I've got a couple tie straps here, just to hold the strap to the piece of steel. As I start to get that bent up against there, it's holding the radius pretty well. There's a gap down here, looks to be about a quarter inch or so. So it's not exactly perfectly round. I may not have heat treated this so uniformly, so maybe it's still got a little bit of spring down here, where else it's holding well against that radius. So I continue to tighten this down. I think that once it's tightened down, it's going to be where it's going to stay. But once I get it tightened down, my plan is to leave it until overnight. I guess I was hoping to have a little bit more bend on it than that after tightening it down like we did. But in all honesty, that represented several hours worth of work on the last bar. After quite a bit of bending and twisting, I got my second hoop also semicircular anyway. It's not exactly a perfect hoop, but I think that what I'm going to do now, as you probably guessed, is I'm going to go ahead and weld one side of it. By welding one side of it, what I'm hoping to do here is put it through the ring roller a few more times and get that radius to be a little bit more consistent. So anyway, I think that we're getting pretty close to having a hoop here. One thing I need to do is grind a chamfer into the sides here. This is 1/4 inch thick material, so I think that if I want to get good penetration, I'm going to have to grind a chamfer so that I can fill in with the weld. So I've got this fixtured up, and I'm ready to give it a weld. I got my weld complete, and I went ahead and ground the weld down so it's flush with the metal. as close as I could get it. Seemed to come out okay. And for the most part, this thing sits pretty flat, so kind of happy with that. I'm going to run it through the ring roller a couple times to make the circle a little bit more concentric. So there's a couple spots. I guess you have to kind of wonder sometimes if it's my imagination or what. Seems to be a little bit of a kink right here, and there's a couple spots where it doesn't seem to be quite as round as maybe I'd like if it's going to be wheel. So I'm going to run it through the ring roller a few times and see if I can get this to be a little bit more round. So I've got this hoop reasonably round now. The end doesn't quite meet up here because of the weight of it, but I think I'm just going to go ahead and weld it up, and then it's off to 10 fingers woodworking to have the spokes put on. So I'm fixtured up for my second weld here, and I think you can have a fairly nice hoop. Looks pretty good. My weld's complete. Came out looking pretty good, I thought. So I just need to grind it smooth with the rest of the steel, so that the hub can go in here, or the wooden spokes can go in here flush, and then it's off to 10 fingers woodworking. There we are, a complete hoop. Not quite perfect, but I think well enough that the spokes should bring it into round. So I think this is going to be an interesting project, and with the collaboration, it should be even a little bit more interesting yet. Thanks for watching my video. Have a great day.